Hi, everyone. Welcome to Drink It In, the podcast, season 11. This is the rabbi season. I am so excited. I've been interviewing different rabbis, and one rabbi in particular I had seen on Instagram. Honestly, I had listened to him on a different podcast uh, with Asher Gottesman. I had heard you with Asher Gottesman, and I was so taken in. I guess that's a great word with your story, with how you presented yourself, with how you touched the subject. And that's when I started following Rabbi Zippel, and he'll introduce himself in a second. And I said, you know what? When I do this season, I want to have him on. And it's such good timing. Also, I think you'll also share with everyone afterwards about your book. I mean, that just worked out, timing wise, which was unbelievable in that
Perfect
sense.
timing. Sure.
Perfect timing. But I would love just what everyone could get a little bit of a background, Rabbi Zippel, where you're from originally, because this is also about like being a rabbi. So not only where you're from, like, was this your dream job to be a rabbi? Like, did you have this other vision of what you wanted to be? Like, I want to be a dancer. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe you wanted to be a fireman
I
or
was
something.
I was thinking about being a dancer. I was never very quick on my feet, so yeah, that wasn't in the cards for me.
So where you were from, what your dream job was, where you ended up now, and then just like give us, and then we'll have a conversation about it. How's that?
Sure. So that sounds great to me. My name is Avremi Zippel. I'm a Chabbad shliach in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's actually interesting. Just this morning, there was somebody in the Chabad house who came in for an event from out of town. So they said to me, oh, hey, where are you from? I said, I'm from Salt Lake City. So she says to me, she says, yes, but where are you from? I said, I'm from Salt Lake City. She says, yes, but where are you from? And I had to explain to her, as she was seeming to struggle with this idea a little bit. I was raised here in Salt Lake City. My parents started the Chabad house 31 years ago. And like hundreds and thousands of shluchim's kids around the world, I was raised on the job. And I think that when that happens in most environments, the way a lot of the kids who are raised in that sort of dynamic grow up, usually it leads to one of two very different realities. Either they grow up in that sort of environment, and to your point, they from a very young age say, "This is my dream job. Yeah, I want to do this when I get bigger. I'm so sold on this way of life, and it seems awesome, and it seems fulfilling, and this is definitely what I want to do." And I think some kids run for the hills. They want nothing to do with that way of life, and there's a lot of truth and a lot of power to both of those reactions, as one might understand well. And I was in the first category. I'm the oldest of six. I was very much raised in that sort of environment and kind of the prototypical shliach and shlucha's kid. And from a very young age, this was something that I wanted to do on my own. And I kind of, set up my life, for lack of a better term, to be able to do that. I went to yeshiva, I got smicha, I got married. My wife is the daughter of Chabad shluchim herself in Northern California. And once we got married and we spent a few months in Kailo, this opportunity presented itself, and we're both here living our dream jobs. We're both here living the lifestyle that we had envisioned for ourselves and wanted for ourselves from a very, very young age, and that works out. I think that like any job, like any profession, there's a moment where you think to yourself, "Is this really what I want to be doing?" And I think that every dream job comes with those moments of where you have to remind yourself why this was your dream job and why it continues to be your dream job. And isn't that life for all of us? I mean, I think that on some level we all go through that. We all
Yes.
go through that process where we regularly have to remind ourselves why we made the choices we did and why we're here and what we're doing about it. And life rolls on from there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. For me, I think I had a passion and I had a dream when I was 18. And then life happened. I just went along with the course and I became a teacher, and that was definitely in the mix. But then in 2019, I was on this trip and had this experience that reminded me of that dream of when I was 18. And I'm like, okay, it's time. It's time to revisit that. It's time to really try. I'm not getting any younger. It's really time for me to pursue that passion and really make a go out of it. And so I was doing it a little bit, but it was just like in a different format. And then I
Sure.
said, I really want to do it full force.
Totally. And I
Yeah.
think all of us go through that at some point. Either we're doing it and we question why we're doing it, or we're not doing it and we question why we're not doing it and should we be doing it. And I guess that's life. Try to keep it fresh.
Yes, 100%, 100%. So you were living in Salt Lake City, okay? Then you went away. Did you ever go away from home to go to
I went home
learn?
after bar mitzvah. Yeah, no, I mean, here in Salt Lake City, we all left after bar mitzvah. In fact, when I was a kid, the educational infrastructure that Chabad has now, by in the way of online school and other such organizations, did not exist yet. It was very commonplace among some of my friends to leave before bar mitzvah,
Mm,
10, 11. Nowadays, bar mitzvah is still kind of the going age, bar or bas mitzvah. I left at bar mitzvah right after. I have a summer birthday, and so my bar mitzvah was in the summer, and 2 weeks later I was on a plane. And I on some level it's life that and so you can't begin to fathom something outside that. We were homeschooled as kids, which led to a lot of interesting and curious questions, both locally here in town and from the friends that I would make later on who went to more traditional schools, who would try to understand what that's like. What is it like to be at home every day? What's it like to only be in school for 3, 4 hours a day? What's it like to not have that classroom dynamic? And I
right.
think the undervalued part of it is that's life. You can't imagine something different than that. And so you go with it. And you come to understand that other people lead very different lives, and other kids my age were in school 8 hours a day when they were 11 and I wasn't. And they had classroom dynamics and I didn't. But at some point, the life that you live is the only life that you know, and you don't imagine what's outside that, and you go with it.
Right. So it's so interesting that you mentioned homeschooling. I remember some years ago, so in the mornings, I'm a middle school dean and I teach eighth grade. And there was a boy that came to our school. Really, all of his siblings switched from homeschool into the regular school structure. But for him, his first year ever was eighth grade of being in a regular school.
That was mine too, eighth grade.
Yeah. Oh, so you're gonna maybe you'll relate to this story. It's a crazy story. So he happened not to have been my student, but I was covering a class for another teacher, and I knew he was homeschooled originally. And my job was to give back the tests and tell the students, please get them signed. So I give them back the test, and I said, okay, everybody, please make sure you get them signed. So he innocently raises his hand and he says, "You want me to sign my test?" So and maybe another teacher, if they didn't know the student's background, would have thought the kid is being disrespectful. But since I knew he was homeschooled, I said, "Oh no, let me explain. This is a form of communication between the teacher and the parent. I know that you know what you got on your test, but you bring the test home and you show your parents, and then they
Right.
sign it, and it comes back, and that's how I know that your parents know. Because for him, if he took a test, his parents automatically knew the grade. So it was like a right. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. My mother administered my tests.
Right.
Yeah,
So for him to hear someone say to him, "Get your test signed," he was clueless. He's like, "What does that mean? Get my test signed?"
totally,
Totally, right?
totally. Yeah, I get that. I get that a lot. It is an acclamation. It really, really is an acclamation, and you go through it. You really do. You don't have much of a choice, and I don't want that to sound daunting or overwhelming, but the human spirit remains undefeated. You make it work. You go through it. You do the thing, and you move on. No one has a perfect childhood. I think
Right.
no one goes through their formative years without experiencing some sort of acclimation period and having to tweak the way they were doing things and start envisioning them in a different fashion. And so you do it. You do it and you move on.
Right. Now, were you sent to Crown Heights? Where were you sent?
I was sent to New Jersey. There is a Chabad cheder in Morristown, New Jersey, that
Mhm.
the year that I was bar mitzvah had actually created a class for a number of shluchim's kids who were in situations like mine, who were not had not been in a day school until then, and who were getting acclimated to leaving home. So I was in New Jersey in a cheder for a year, and then I didn't do Crown Heights till much later in life. My journeys took me to high school in Chicago. I was in Yeshiva Gedela in London, and then I eventually make it to Crown Heights at some point. But yeah, as they say, join Chabad, see the world, and yeah, I was able to enjoy a variety of different experiences as part of my yeshiva journey.
And so that was your dream to come back to your hometown. And so you were married and came back? with your wife? Is that how it
Got
worked?
got married and came back. Yeah, I mean, 99.9% of the time, Chabad shluchim will only get a post once they're married, and so
Mhm.
you finish you get smicha, or you finish your yeshiva experience, you get married, you work a little bit, you go to kollel, and you sign up for a post. I was fortunate to have an opportunity close at hand. I had grown up in this community, and I knew there was a space that needed to be filled. A lot of guys sit in Crown Heights, and are willing to go wherever, doing whatever, and sign up for some remarkable assignments. I'll tell you this: when I was a kid, I used to go to various conferences and summer camps and winter camps, and I was like, where's your family on shlichus? In Utah? In Utah? Wow, wow, wow. 20 years later, 30 years later, that is not the case anymore. You say, "Oh, Utah, okay, next." And you have young couples that are sitting in Crown Heights waiting for a posting, and the posting that comes up is in the UAE, or it's in Zambia, or it's in the end of the world, and couples take it. It's a lifestyle of commitment. It's a lifestyle of dedication. And when a young couple says we'll go anywhere, they really they really mean that. Try it out, see what happens. But they really are ready to go anywhere, and in most instances, they do.
Wow. And your parents are still there? Are your parents
My
still alive?
parents are still here. At this point, there are now 6 couples that work and serve the community here in Utah, across the state. And yeah, thank God, there's no shortage of things to do, and work to get done. And they're going strong. Thank God, we all are.
And now how about your kids? Are your kids, is there a school yet, an infrastructure for them by you, or do you still have to send them away?
So one of the things that my wife and I made a priority, and one of the responsibilities that we were given when we moved here, was to create an educational infrastructure. And so we created a preschool, which spilled into a kindergarten and then into an early elementary school. So my oldest will be graduating from second grade at the end of this week, and he had the ability to be in school through second grade, which was, I have to say, a lot further than we had ever anticipated this going. And next year he'll be in Chabad's virtual school. But the school will continue to grow, and my younger kids will grow with the school. I have every expectation that they'll leave by bar mitzvah. We're still a ways away from having a high school or anything formal like that. But in terms of where they are right now, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for the fact that they have opportunities that I didn't have. They have classmates. They're in school 7 hours a day, and they have the ability to experience childhood in that sense in a way that I didn't. And that's awesome. That's something which is a tremendous gift from on high, and we're very grateful for that.
And now your personal schedule, are you teaching in the school? Are you more in a like a pulpit type of position? What is your like official position where you are?
So my official position, actually, on my business card, got changed as of a few weeks ago. I'm now the director of development for the Chabad House.
Okay.
As it pertains to the school, I teach sparingly. I'm one of the subs that they call on when the cupboard really gets bare. I more in a financial capacity. I make sure that the teachers that we do have get paid on time. My
Okay.
wife and I also direct a very active young professional network, connecting young Jews who are here in town for their first jobs, or settling down with a family, and creating community around that. And I think that one of the very appealing things for me about the shlichus lifestyle was the unpredictable nature of it. Literally every day you're doing something else. It is very, very not dry. It's very not by routine. Right now we're in the height of planning for summer camp, and summer camp will start in 2 weeks, and then it's 4 weeks where your responsibilities include everything from janitor to bus driver to sandwich maker to everything else, and then it's the high holidays, and you're teaching classes, and it really is kind of fluid throughout the year, given the season that you're in, and given the time of year that you're in, and what the responsibilities are. And I think that's what appeals to a lot of people. I think that's what doesn't appeal to a lot of people as well. But I think for those that it does appeal to, I think that the constant fluid nature of it is something which really is a plus.
Oh, okay, so now we're going to touch on your book. So I know that you had just come out with a book, but maybe give the listeners some background to whatever you feel comfortable with in reference to the book, what the book is about, your connection to everything, and however, the floor is
Sure.
yours.
Well,
You know what I'm
with
saying?
with the book being out, I think the parameters of what I'm comfortable with have really kind of been stretched to their limit. I
I was
mean,
gonna say, like, it kind of blew up already.
there's there's no holding anything back at this point. So just kind of continuing this conversation from where it was, my siblings and I were homeschooled. We were taught primarily by my mother. We are bunched very close together at the top. There was a lot of kids over a short number of years, and my father was out of the house most of the day. As I mentioned, the unpredictable nature, doing all the things that a Chabad shliach does. My mother was home with us. She was also trying to teach us and also trying to care for the ones that she wasn't teaching. And so, after a few of us were born, my parents hired a full-time caregiver. They asked around in town, found someone who was very highly recommended, had a lengthy career in childcare, and she became part of the family environment. About a year after she started working for us in September of 1999, it was just a few weeks after my 8th birthday. Our family's caregiver began to sexually abuse me. Um, this started happening, and I was 8 years old. Um, I was 8 years old a generation ago. Um, you know, we had conversations when I was a kid about stranger danger, which was the frame of reference for my generation. When you go to the local park or the local playground, if there's a creepy man on the playground who's giving out candy to kids, don't take the candy, don't talk to him, don't talk to strangers, come straight home. And I think the world that we lived in that generation was that the only people, God forbid, might entertain the bizarro notion of hurting children are strangers, are creepy people that you don't know. The person who was hurting me wasn't a stranger, wasn't creepy, was part of the family dynamic, was a loved and trusted adult at that point. And so as that's the scenario, I didn't really have the frame of reference to know what to do about that. It's not something you're trained for. And I didn't say anything about it. I didn't know who to talk to or what to say. And as a result of that, it continued. It went on for a very, very long time. And I was in a situation where I couldn't say anything. I didn't say anything. The silence allows it to continue to some extent. I would leave home, as I mentioned. I would come back for the Yom Tovim, for family events, for whatever the case was, and it would continue whenever I was home. Eventually, my family outgrew the need for a caregiver, and she went her way, and everyone left on very peaceful terms. Obviously, nobody knew about it, and at that point, I promised myself that I had done a really good job of keeping it quiet while it was ongoing. And so, if that's the case, then keeping it quiet while it's part of my past is going to be infinitely, unimaginably easier. And so that's what I committed myself to doing at that time, was just keeping it quiet, making sure that nobody could ever or would ever find out. I got married. My wife and I had our first kid, and eventually the scars catch up to you. The scars will always catch up to you. And that's a powerful lesson that I've learned in life, and one that I really speak about often, is that you can't keep these things down. You can hold them off, you can delay them, you can push them off, you can slow it down, but you can't lock them away. It just doesn't happen. And eventually, the issues that I was struggling with took hold of my life to such an extent that I was in a really dark place. And at the urging of my family, who had no idea of any of the backstory, I went to therapy, and I disclosed for the first time to another human being that this had been part of my life. And that began a process of healing and a process of trying to put things back together. At some point in time, I reported to law enforcement, and that began a journey of my life. And ultimately, an investigation began. My abuser was taken into custody. There was a trial. And in the middle of all of this, I had to grapple with a really large decision whether to come forward or not. And when I say come forward, whether to come forward publicly. Throughout the disclosure process with law enforcement, I had been able to stay anonymous, keep my name out of it, and there are protections in place for victims. And at a certain point, there was a large possibility that I was going to have to testify in open court, and at some point, it was going to get out. So in 2019, I made the decision that instead of it getting out and my having to forever play catch up to the story, I was going to tell it on my own terms. I was going to just get it all out there, which I did. I did in 2019. There was a trial later on that year. I'm not even going to say what happened in the truck, because I want people to buy the book. And the court process wrapped up, and when it was all said and done, I remember the first time someone said to me, like, you've lived through this just crazy, crazy situation. You really should write it all down. And I was like, yeah, sure, anytime. Yeah, for sure. And then, another person brought it up, and another person brought it up, and another person brought it up, and then the opportunity presented itself to do the project in a complete form and fashion. And so, about a year ago, just over a year ago at this point, when the book deal came together, and I wrote it over the course of this past year, and it came out about a week and a half ago, and it made Amazon's bestseller list on Thursday. And so it's all out there. Starting from very, very, very beginning, going through the years of confusion and the years of healing and the years of reporting to law enforcement and everything that happened as a result of that. It's all out there. It's out there, and we're getting some tremendous, tremendous feedback about it, and it's out there. I think more than anything, with the hope and the goal to be able to help people, to give voice and to give awareness to a certain extent to a topic that is not widely discussed in our communities, to try and provide some sort of language for kids who are going through this, who have gone through this, that they should feel that they're not alone. They should know that there's other people that have gone through this, that have, to some extent gotten to the other side, and can provide that hope and that optimism for people who are still going through it, and you hope to make the world a better place.
Okay, so I have two main questions for you. I'm sure they'll lead to more questions. When your parents found out about it, what was their reaction?
So one of the things that I was very particular about when I was preparing for that conversation, I had been in therapy for a short while before I disclosed to my parents, and one of the things that I was able to understand right away was that this was really not their fault. There's a perception out there, and this perception existed back in 2016 when I first came forward, and I think it's been debunked more and more over the years, and I think it's still out there to a certain extent. And I think it really touches on a topic that we briefly glossed over earlier. If you believe that the only people that harm children are people who have visible red flags, then every sort of home that this happens in should be a glaring indictment on the parents of that household. Why is it that you let your children have any access to an adult that has any sort of red flag? If, however, we understand that the sorts of people that do this to children are not always red flag people, they're trusted, loving, caring adults, we can also understand that it's not always the parents' fault. In fact, in many instances, it's not. In many instances, we come to understand that the people who do this are very, frankly, good at what they do, and they're able to avoid that detection because the parents would have never suspected them, and society would never expect them. And so when I went to have that conversation with my parents, it was important to me to convey that information in a way that would not leave them feeling any sort of guilt. And I was really intentional about that. And I sat down with them and said, I don't want you guys to feel bad about this, because I firmly believe, and I said this 7.5 years ago, and I believe it with the same intensity back then as I do today. There's nothing that you could have done or could have not done that would have changed the reality. This happened because it happened. And so I didn't want them to feel guilty. I wanted to share this with them, and we would all move on from this together, and it would all be okay. The funny thing about guilt is that you can go to someone and say, "Hey, I want to tell you something. I don't want you to feel guilty." It's like saying no offense and then offending somebody. Just because you preface that you don't want them to feel guilty, very often they'll still feel guilty. And so that's what happened, right? My parents had to cope with that. My parents had to cope with the fact that they felt like they may have missed something, and that was a journey for them. That was absolutely a journey for them to come to peace with that, to understand what that meant for them, and to find some wholesomeness in their life as a result of that. And one of the themes that I really try to hit on, really in a very crucial fashion in the book, is the multiple paths of healing that inevitably unfold from a reality like this. You have the survivor in the middle, and they have their path of healing, and they have all of their loved ones whose lives are affected by this sort of situation, whose path of healing unfolds, and it leads into very different places, and everyone embarks on that journey together, but very separately, because those paths will lead to very different destinations. And so for my parents, that was there. path of healing moving forward is, figuring out how they were going to feel about themselves and their lives, and the household that they had created, and that was the work.
Right, right. It's interesting when you said you already had started a little bit of the therapy before you said something to your parents. So it's interesting. I'm just curious. Well, one, I'm curious what format of therapy did you find the most beneficial for you? Because I know they talk about EMDR and things like that. So I'm just curious about that. But before you even get there, um, did you feel, and again, this is a deep question, did you feel at a certain point, and maybe you had worked through therapy, and that helped you get past it, did you feel perhaps abandoned by your parents or not protected by your parents? And then you came to that reality after the fact through therapy, but perhaps initially, even though now you're able to say with clarity, what you are saying and about it's
Right.
not their fault and so on, but the initial reaction that perhaps you felt as that child within that inner child feeling, where were you, okay, I'm saying I'm not, and if your parents listening to this, I don't mean to make you feel
Great.
guilty or anything.
No, no, no. It's a fair
Yeah.
question. It's a fair question. I'll start with the first one. As it's pretty straightforward. I was I gained tremendous benefit from what is clinically referred to as CBT, not to be confused with CBD. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is referred to, more colloquially as talk therapy. Really on a basic level, you sit down, you talk about the situations, you unpack them, and you move on from there. Obviously, as someone who has undergone childhood trauma, EMDR is an invaluable resource. I was actually on a Zoom call earlier today where someone described that EMDR is an incredible asset that needs to be paired with a more um, repairing form of therapy. And so the analogy that was provided that I loved is, if you've got a room in your house that's just a huge mess, the most effective way usually to set that up is to take everything out, throw out all the garbage, and then put everything back in a neat and orderly fashion. EMDR is the removal. EMDR is taking out all the wreckage, throwing out the bad stuff, but then you've got to put things back in a neat and orderly fashion. And so um, I I I hesitate to speak about which particular form of therapy works for me, because a lot of people, I feel like, take that information as a lesson, as an endorsement. Oh, you got to do it this way. There are so many forms of therapy that work for so many different people on different days at different times, I encourage survivors to, more than anything, engage in a relationship with a mental health professional who will give you the comfort to try. And you'll try certain things and you'll be like, oh, that didn't work very well. And that's okay. And we'll try something else, as opposed to feeling locked in to a certain style, to a certain path. You got to do it this way, do this thing this many times, you'll get this result. And if you didn't, I don't know, you're a failure. What should I tell you? And so, to me, that's a crucial reality when it comes to therapy. As it pertains to that, that at some point that I feel that betrayal or anything of the sort, I would actually clarify that the answer is absolutely not. And it's crucial to make that clarification. And it's important to remember that until I went to therapy, so for about 16 years, from when the abuse began until I first walked into a doctor's office, I absorbed all of the shame around what had happened. And so instead of feeling somehow betrayed or let down by my parents, I felt like, God forbid they should know what was going on. Because if they were to know what was going on, they would really come to understand how much I was disappointing them, how much I was letting them down by engaging in this horrible, horrible behavior. And so, no, at no point did I ever feel let down, or, that I had somehow, they had dropped the ball on my watch, because for the longest time, this was shame that I absorbed. This was something that I had done just terribly, terribly wrong. And as a result of that, I was the one who needed to carry all of that responsibility. Um, and so, yeah, I went from there into therapy to understanding that none of the shame belongs with me, or anybody else for that matter, with the exception of the person who harmed me. And so I think, as I kind of look back on the totality of the journey, I think no, I think there was never a time where I felt like I had somehow been betrayed or let down. It went from my absorbing all of the shame to realizing that I had been harmed. I had been I had been abused, and I use that term very specifically because I think that the real realization was that beyond the abuse in a physical sense, beyond the episodes that happened, and there were many of them, there was also the psychological abuse. There was the baggage that you have to carry for years and years and years after, and that's all a form and a manifestation of that abuse. And so, for me, that was kind of point A to point B, and with that being the journey, with those being the stops, there never was a time to feel that sort of betrayal.
Okay, beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Besides putting out the book and doing the work that you do for the immediate community, I know you also, if I could use the word, dabble with addiction homes or rehab facilities that perhaps are in that area. How did you get into that?
So interestingly enough, my father's been doing that actually for almost the entire time that he's been here in Utah. Utah has a large concentration of treatment centers for teens that are struggling with all sorts of issues in life. It's a tremendous part of his work here in Utah. He's an absolute legend in that field. I got involved more recently, specifically with the kids that have been through abusive situations. And sadly, there had been episodes that had come to light where a lot of kids who had suffered childhood trauma, um, their parents, perhaps rightfully so, didn't know what to do with them, and so the only recourse that they had available was just shipping these kids on a plane and just sending them to Utah and hoping that somebody else would perhaps help alleviate their problems. And for children who have gone through traumatic situations, going through that process was the single most damaging thing to them. And granted, their behaviors are difficult and they're a little bit out of control, and it's hard to figure out what to do with them. But what had actually been done to them, with them, was not really helping the situation. And I think more than it pertains to a specific arena or a specific set of circumstances, I found in this line of work, I guess you could say, that if you put yourself out there, people will find you. People will find. I had a conversation with someone who called me last week, and I heard out this person's situation. I said, I'm happy to help. I'm just curious. Sometimes someone reaches out to you, and initially in the phone call, they'll say, I'm a friend of such and such, and such gave me your number, or I live here, I know this person. And as this person is talking to me, I'm like thinking about where they're from and their background and their community, and I'm like, I don't know anybody that this person knows. There's no degrees of separation. And so I said to this person, I'm happy to talk. I'm really curious more than anything, and you don't have to answer this question. How did you get my cell phone number? And she goes on to tell you, she kind of beat around the bush. And then the conversation, she tells me, like, there was literally, like, 3 loops. She knows someone who knew me. And I think it's just a reminder that in the world, sometimes what you've got to do is you've got to put yourself out there. And how the world will benefit from that, the world will take care of itself. The Almighty is a very big God, and He'll find a way for whatever needs to happen. And so I'm very privileged to lead a life where I've seen that more times than I can even imagine, that whatever needs to happen will inevitably happen. And you sit back and you put yourself out there, and you make yourself that vessel to receive the blessings from God, and they'll all fall into place.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. If you could share maybe through being a rabbi and through your journey, what would you say is probably the most rewarding encounter that you've had? I know writing the book for sure, but I'm saying not on your own personal, but maybe in interaction with somebody else that you felt, wow, I can't believe I was able to help, whatever. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your.
You know, I'm going to push back on that for a moment, because I think that within the field of people who are communal leaders, let's just say rabbis, teachers, leaders, when we think about our most impactful moments, the way you phrase the question is inevitably going to be a situation where we were able to do something, where we were able to help, where we were able to say the thing, to have the insightful answer, and to be the person that did something monumental. If I think about the most rewarding part of being a communal rabbi. It is the remarkable human beings that I've had the opportunity to meet, that perhaps the nature of our relationship began because there had been a thought that I had something to provide for them. And 9 times out of 10, the balance of that relationship will end up going the other way. What I love about my job and about the path in life that I've chosen is that I find myself in the situation where I get to meet the most amazing men and women in the world every single day, and people who have tremendous elements to their life and things to teach and things to give, and you get to be in a position where you get to experience all that and to experience the broad colors of the spectrum of life. I think that's why I stay in this. I stay in this because the Almighty blesses you, that you have the ability to create the most impactful relationships that you gain from. I have stopped trying to go through life trying to always know what to say in every situation. Best case scenario, I'll be a really good listener, and I'll find myself in a situation where I'll be able to gain from that sort of dynamic. And I think more than anything, I've also come to a spot in my life where I'm okay being in a place where I don't always have to have the wise thing to say, because sometimes people don't don't need to hear a wise thing. They just they want to feel heard. We all can think of dynamics and relationships where we are sharing something with somebody else, and as we're speaking, we can already see the wheels turning in their head, and they're formulating a response to our question, and we're not even halfway through the question. And
Hmm.
at a certain point, they've already stopped listening to the question because they're already cooking up an answer. I have a notorious habit among my friends. If someone sends me a minute or a minute and a half or longer voice note, and I'll start listening to the voice note and I'll start typing out a response mid voice note. And so I have this reputation among my friends. People will send me a voice note that's 90 seconds long, and at the 30-second mark, there's a question, and at the 60-second mark, there's a clarifier to that question, but I'll have already typed out a response to the 30-second question that if I would have just waited for the 60-second mark, I would have found that my answer is completely useless and doesn't help anybody. I should have just waited and listened to the entirety of the message. So that's on WhatsApp with a voice note. But we all
Right.
can think of dynamics in life where we do the same thing, right? Where we don't listen. We're like, the moment has arrived for me to say something insightful. Everyone get ready. Here it comes. And for me, the most impactful part and the most enjoyable part of being able to do what I do is to try to be another human being with people, is to try and listen and be there with them, in their experiences more than anything, and allow them to feel heard.
Oh, that's beautiful. Very well said. So, on that note, then, what would you say is something that was the most impactful that you heard?
What was the most impactful thing that I heard?
You're like, oh, I gotta, like, sometimes you hear these things, you're like, oh, I gotta remember this one.
That is a very, very good question.
Thank you.
That is a very good question. What is the most impactful thing that I heard? Um, Early on in my healing journey, before anybody that I knew, before anybody knew that I was going through this, and it's not like anybody was saying things to me intentionally, knowing what I was going through at the moment. I was having a conversation with a member of my family who was struggling personally, who was going through a tremendous health struggle. And when people struggle with things that are clearly from God, like health, health we can't blame on other human beings. I mean, nowadays it's trendy too, but if we all were mature and thoughtful about it, we'd realize that health we can't blame on other human beings. So, health, there's an ability to clearly see things as being from God.
Hmm.
Hashem wants this moment for you for whatever. And I was speaking to this person, and he was sharing with me that, he's going through this health struggle, and a lot of people are reaching out to him with all sorts of explanations. Oh, the reason you're struggling is because of this, is because of that. And he says, these explanations, they're not doing it for me. I'm not feeling any better because people have somehow found justification or rationalization what I'm going through. So I said to him, I said, oh, so what's the alternative? If all of these answers and beautiful thoughts are not moving the needle for you, what what is a good spot for you to be in? So he says to me, this is by phone, he says, I don't know. I don't know that I need an answer right now. It is okay for me to be in a tough spot and turn to the Almighty God and say, I don't know what you want from me here. I don't know what you want from me here. So I'm, instead of me putting words into your mouth, you being God in the situation, saying, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. It's for this and this and this, isn't it? I I'm gonna turn to Hashem and say, I don't know what you want. I don't know what you want. And all I can really hope for in this moment is that you give me the wherewithal to help me discover what you hope to accomplish over here. Like just show me where this is supposed to go. Point me in a direction and I will walk. Just at this moment, I'm somewhat unclear as to what the direction is. And that really stuck with me. That really stuck with me. And this was at a point in my journey, before I really started having to grapple with the reality of what the heck does God want from me? When you go to therapy and you come to understand that this is your life's journey, at some point you ask yourself, what are you doing? Almighty God, what are you doing? What do you want? Again, point me in a direction and I will walk. But what is the direction? What do you see in all of this? And having that question is okay. I think that a lot of people feel that Yiddishkeit is about being in a position where every question instantaneously needs an answer. And in my experience, I found that not to be the case. I think Yiddishkeit is a reality that welcomes questions that inspire more action. And I think turning to the Almighty God and saying, look, I'm sure you've got this figured out. I haven't got it figured out. And so if you would be so kind as to enlighten me as to what exactly you're planning with all of this, I would be forever grateful. And you're not going to get an answer right away, right? You're not going to get an answer that minute or that day. It might take weeks or months or years, frankly, for that direction to become apparent. But I think that living in a mindset where having that question was okay and it was all right and it was okay to be in that questioning phase, giving myself permission to do the same thing when that time came for me was very powerful.
Wow. Wow, beautiful, beautiful. So if somebody wanted to get your book, you want to tell everyone what the name of your book is, and
Sure.
also we'll put a
So
link.
the name of the book, the name of the book is Not What I Expected. You can go on Amazon and you can look under Not What I Expected. I found that there's three other books, or I don't even know if it's a movie or anything, but there's three other offerings on Amazon under the same name. Mine is the one that has a picture of my face on it. For your listeners that are in the New York area, I strongly encourage you to support local. Judaic World in Crown Heights carries it in stock. Eichler's in Borough Park and in Flatbush each carry it in stock. But yes, it's available on Amazon with Prime shipping. You can get it in some places in a day or two. And I'm excited for people to pick it up. I'm excited. The feedback that we've been getting has been tremendous. And we're excited to see where that keeps going.
And now, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best form of reaching out to you?
I try to be very responsive on social media. Sometimes it is easier said than done,
Mhm.
but it's at least my stated intention at this point. I'm at Utah Rabbi on every platform that exists, and I encourage people to reach out. I really do. If with questions or comments or feedback, other survivors, whatever the case is, I welcome the opportunity to talk and to share. It's a tremendous part of my life.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time for being on my podcast. It was quite a rewarding and enlightening conversation. Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.
My pleasure.